In the opulent grand hall, where sparkling chandeliers bathed the polished marble floors in a warm golden hue, wealth and prestige held court. Attendees, clad in lavish tuxedos and dresses worth more than a small house, mingled effortlessly, their laughter blending with the delicate clink of fine crystal champagne glasses. I lingered near the entrance, adjusting the sleeves of my modest yet impeccably tailored suit, simple, but carrying an air of quiet dignity. Across the vast room, my wife's laughter echoed, bright and melodic, as she stood surrounded by her circle of affluent companions. I approached, hoping to join her, but as I reached for a seat, her face twisted into a mask of scorn. "Don't even think about sitting here," she hissed, her words dripping with malice. "You're nothing but a cleaner. This table is for people of stature." Her friends smothered their giggles, their eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. My chest tightened, but I swallowed my response, staring at the woman I'd sworn to cherish, now discarding me like trash. She turned away, whispering to her companions as if I didn't exist. Each word stung, and every glance from the crowd felt like a beam illuminating my humiliation, as if I were a stranger in my own world. Then, a low, sleek hum from outside cut through the party's buzz. A glossy black limousine glided to a halt, its surface reflecting the hall's grandeur. The door opened, revealing a billionaire whose face was instantly recognizable from magazines and screens. The room fell silent, all eyes on him as he surveyed the crowd, his gaze locking onto me. With a wide, heartfelt smile, he called out, "My son!" His voice rang with pride, stunning the room. "It's been far too long." My wife's face paled, her eyes widening in disbelief. The billionaire's arrival sent a ripple of shock through the hall. Conversations halted, drinks paused mid-air, and even the orchestra's notes softened to a whisper. Everyone knew him, a magnate whose empire stretched across nations, his name a byword for power and riches. Yet, instead of greeting the hosts or mingling with the elite, he walked straight toward me with purpose. "My son," he repeated, his voice warm with affection and command, pulling me into a robust embrace that echoed through the astonished crowd. Murmurs broke out. Did he call him my son? Him. Connected to that man? Impossible, he's just a janitor. My wife's grip on her champagne flute tightened, her knuckles turning pale as if the glass might crack. The billionaire turned to her, his sharp eyes evaluating. "And who is this?" he inquired, his tone calm but tinged with intrigue. I replied evenly. "My wife, though tonight she made it clear she'd rather I not sit with her. Apparently, I don't measure up to her standards." The room hummed with whispers, her friends shifting uncomfortably, their earlier mirth giving way to unease. The billionaire's expression tightened, his gaze flicking to her before settling back on me with a sly grin. "That's quite funny," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "because this venue, this event, even the cars outside, all are part of my corporation, which means they're tied to my son." The revelation struck like lightning. My wife's jaw dropped, her friends' smug expressions evaporated, and the hosts, who had previously ignored me, hurried to offer belated gestures of respect. As I smoothed my suit, meeting my wife's panicked stare, I knew the night was only beginning to unravel. The ballroom, once filled with lively chatter and the clinking of glasses, now stood hushed, my wife at the center of a stunned silence, her confidence crumbling under the weight of her own disdain. The billionaire placed a hand on my shoulder, addressing the crowd with unwavering authority. "For too long, my son has been dismissed because he chose humility over arrogance. Let me clarify, every business I've built, every luxury you see here, belongs to him as much as it does to me." His words landed with finality, like a judge's verdict. Guests stirred, some rising to approach me, their earlier mockery replaced by eager handshakes and words of admiration. My wife shrank back, her glass slipping from her trembling hand and shattering on the marble floor. One of her friends, who had laughed at her earlier barb, muttered loudly enough for others to hear, "You rejected a man the entire room now covets." Laughter followed, not directed at me, but at her, the woman who had chosen scorn over loyalty. I stepped forward, my voice calm but resonant. "Tonight, My wife sought to diminish me with a single phrase. Just a janitor. But I'd rather be a janitor than someone who betrays their vows with greed and betrayal. The crowd reacted with gasps, murmurs, and a few bold claps for my honesty. My wife's pale face revealed her dawning realization that the night's revelations were far from over. This wasn't just about revealing my true identity, it was about exposing hers. By the end of the evening, her humiliation would be absolute. The room now revolved around me, every whisper and glance fixed on the unfolding drama. My wife, once radiant in the glow of her peers' admiration, stood alone, her arrogance laid bare for all to witness. I cleared my throat and raised my glass, my voice slicing through the tension. Since my wife chose to make a spectacle tonight, allow me to bring it to a close. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone, and with a single tap, the massive screen behind me lit up. Displayed for all to see were her own words, screenshots of messages sent to her sister, mocking me as worthless, calling me a burden, and joking about abandoning me for a richer suitor. The hall erupted in gasps, chairs creaking as guests leaned forward, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others covering their mouths in shock. My wife raised her hands, as if she could block the damning evidence. "Stop it. Turn it off, please," she begged, but her words were already seared into the minds of those present. The billionaire beside me let out a sharp, cold laugh, his voice cutting through the silence. "You thought my son wasn't enough? He's the only reason you were even here. Without him, you'd still be scraping by." The truth hit harder than any blow. Her friends, once eager to join her mockery, stepped back, as if her betrayal might stain them. The hosts, desperate to avoid further scandal, offered me quiet apologies, pledging their loyalty. My wife stood diminished, her carefully crafted image shattered before the very crowd she'd sought to impress. I pocketed my phone, adjusted my suit, and raised my glass again. "To truth," I said simply, "for without it, all that remains is ruin." The spotlight returned to her, trembling and utterly isolated. The silence after my toast was heavy, suffocating. My wife stood frozen, her eyes darting from one guest to another, finding no trace of sympathy. But I wasn't finished. I set my glass down and addressed the room with resolute clarity. This was meant to be a celebration of our anniversary, but it became a display of arrogance. I was belittled, dismissed as nothing more than a cleaner. "Tonight, you've all seen who I truly am, and who she is." The crowd murmured, their voices swelling like an incoming tide. The billionaire, my father, stepped forward, his commanding presence silencing the room once more. "My son's integrity and humility are worth more than all the wealth in this hall," he declared. "Anyone who treats him as lesser has no place beside him." His words were not just praise, they were a judgment. My wife staggered back, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking. "Please, I didn't mean it. I was nervous. I didn't know." But her pleas were ignored, her friends averting their eyes, unwilling to share her shame. I slipped my wedding ring from my finger and placed it on the table, the faint clink of metal against glass louder than her excuses. "I'd rather stand alone with dignity," I said calmly, "than remain tied to someone who treats me like dirt." The billionaire placed a steady hand on my shoulder, and together we walked out of the ballroom, the crowd parting in quiet respect. I didn't need fiery revenge. Her own actions had left her to burn in the ruins of her pride. As I stepped into a future brighter than the chandeliers behind me, I left her to face the consequences of her betrayal.